This is Story Recapped. Today I'm gonna explain a drama, fantasy, and horror film called Life Changer. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. A young woman wakes up next to a rotting corpse. Unfazed, she gets out of bed and checks herself in the mirror, noting the wound on her side and recalling how it was inflicted with a knife on the floor. Later, the woman saws the corpse, then takes a shower, assuring herself that what she does is for her survival. She then sets 2 garbage bags on fire in the middle of nowhere and hides the charred bones under a barn, a task that has become repetitive to her. Still, she believes true love exists, and she's felt it before, though it was never truly hers. After the deed, she eats at a diner while reading her name, Emily Roberts, on her wallet. She recalls how someone once saw the real her. She heads to her house and notes how she can never forget that kind of love. At the house, she smokes and enjoys jazz music. Soon, her boyfriend James walks in, scolding her for disappearing. She simply ignores him while recalling how most people can't see through her camouflage. James starts calling the police, noting that Emily disappeared for 3 days, and she's surprised that it's been that long. She asks him to stop talking to the police, and when he doesn't listen, she stabs him with a corkscrew. She's not proud of having done so, but she feels she has no choice as she cleans up the scene. Later, Emily notices her rotting body. She laments how the rot starts so quickly when her body lasted years when she was younger. Once the rot starts, she has around 6 hours to change. She worries how the body should have lasted longer. With no time to plan things out, she decides to order food. When she answers the door, however, Detective Ransone is at her door. Ransone gets confused that she's back, so he asks to talk to James, but Emily tells him he's not home. Still, she invites him in and offers him coffee. Ransone interrogates Emily over her disappearance, but she ignores his questions and gives him his coffee. She feigns embarrassment over her situation, letting Ransone put his guard down. With a menacing look, Emily grabs Ransone's arms. He gasps in pain, and his face starts deforming. Later, Ransone's corpse is left on the couch, while the shapeshifter, who was transformed into Ransone, gets used to his body and identity. He checks Ransone's firearm and smiles. Then, he smashes the original Ransone's jaw to remove his teeth and pours gasoline all over the house. When he steps out, the delivery man finally arrives, so he takes the food and walks away without paying. Suddenly, the delivery man shouts that the house is on fire, but the shapeshifter simply drives away. The shapeshifter drives through the city, ignoring the police radio on the dashboard. Knowing that he can't use Ransone's identity, he needs the body to rot again, so he figures out a way to find recreational substances. After taking one from a dealer, the shapeshifter uses the substance while thinking of the woman he loved. Later that evening, the shapeshifter heads to a bar and greets the dog Max, who always hangs around outside. Inside, he orders drinks for a woman named Julia and flirts with her. He introduces himself as Detective Ransone. While they talk, he tells himself that she's the only one that matters. They spend the night laughing and sharing stories, ending it by making out in the alley. However, the shapeshifter starts feeling pain on his side and tells Julia to run. She hesitantly leaves as he cries in pain. His abilities usually save him from injuries sustained by his previous body until now. He struggles back to his car and sees his body rotting. Realizing he doesn't have time, he goes to the next car, where a couple is talking. He shows them their badge and aims a gun at the man. The shapeshifter releases the woman, then orders the man to move to the passenger seat so we can get in. The man, whose name is Sam, tries to defend himself for being with a younger woman, but the shapeshifter hits him. He declares that since he's not ready to die, Sam has to. Moments later, the shapeshifter, who's transformed into Sam, prepares to clean up the crime when he receives a call from Sam's wife. He soon heads to Sam's house, noting that he lives in a family home. He admits to wanting such a life. He heads in and finds the wife, Mary, who immediately walks away in anger. He goes upstairs and sees that Sam has young children. When he heads to the bedroom, he finds Sam's wedding ring on the side table and joins Mary in bed without speaking to her. The daughter wakes him up in the morning, and he yells out in anger, scaring her. He joins the family for breakfast, but he starts to feel the pain already, so he leaves. Accessing Sam's memories, he recalls that the young woman from last night, Rachel, is his assistant who refused to have an affair with him. He goes to the clinic where Sam is the dentist, and Rachel pretends that nothing's wrong. After tending to Sam's patient, he goes to the same diner he visited before as Emily and spots Julia outside. He hires a cab to follow her, but the driver refuses to since he seems suspicious. The shapeshifter gives up, lamenting that he'd been trying to find Julia's new address for nearly a year. That afternoon, he watches a movie where he loudly laughs, much to the other audience's annoyance. He then returns home and joins the family for dinner that evening. Seeing the children's interaction makes him feel guilty, so he heads to the bar to think. There, he reminisces about his true family while he plays with a marble between his fingers. Finally, Julia arrives and recognizes him from the previous night with Rachel. He laughs it off and claims he won't make the mistake of bringing another woman other than his wife again. The shapeshifter adds that he just needed a break from his family, all while thinking of how he left Sam's family suddenly earlier that evening. Julia sympathizes with the feeling, though she realizes it was wrong to run away from her family. She explains that if he loves his family, he should make sure to return to them. Julia shares that she had a husband and a son, and she also wanted to escape from them. Now, she just wants to go back to them. The shapeshifter asks what happened, so Julia explains that her son passed away at 3 years old. It was difficult for her and her husband, Richard. One night, Richard set up a romantic dinner for them, hoping to forget the tragedy even for just one night. They enjoy the evening, but Richard left her afterward. Julia believes that it was just too much for Richard, and the dinner date was his way of saying goodbye. The shapeshifter shares that he's afraid of what he'd do if he stayed, uncertain if he's good for his family. When the shapeshifter declares that being good doesn't matter because bad things happen all the time, Julia adds that what matters is making sure that they're not the bad thing. In the restroom, the shapeshifter sees the rot starting, so he leaves the bar. He rents a motel room for the night but wakes up soon with a rot spreading. He calls Rachel and claims that Mary kicked him out. He asks to see her, which Rachel gets suspicious about. Still, he gets her sympathy, so she heads to the motel. Rachel hesitantly knocks on the door and warns that if he tries anything, she'll leave. She enters and finds the room dark while the shapeshifter is on the bed. Moments later, the shapeshifter, now in Rachel's form, gets ready, while Rachel's real body rots on the bed. She notes that Rachel has access to antibiotics, which would slow down the rotting. She gets a call from Rachel's boyfriend, Tommy, and excuses that she went to the pharmacy due to a migraine. Then, she turns the phone off and disposes of the real Rachel's body. After hiding the charred bones under the barn, a woman comes looking for the owner. The shapeshifter hides and exits from the back door. She then casually walks back to Rachel's car, but the woman, Colleen, spots her and asks who she is. Still, Rachel gets in her car and drives away. At the clinic, the shapeshifter grabs a few bottles of antibiotics and then heads to Rachel's apartment, glad that Tommy isn't home. She then heads to the same bar to sit next to Julia. Julia comments on her dress and befriends her. Julia shares that she's at the bar most nights because she's struggling with her book. When Julia introduces herself, the shapeshifter introduces herself as Drew. After Julia comments that the bar never changes, the shapeshifter highlights that she remembers how it was in the 70s, confusing Julia since Rachel looks young. She excuses that she's an old soul. Julia comments that the shapeshifter has sad eyes, so she shares that she's a counselor and gives her a business card with her office address. Suddenly, a man offers to buy the shapeshifter a drink, so Julia leaves and tells her to have fun. Uninterested, the shapeshifter tries to ignore him while looking back at Julia, who's talking to a man named Robert. The shapeshifter spots the news and realizes that Colleen had reported her to the police, and the charred bones under the barn were found. An artist's sketch of Rachel is shown on the news, so the shapeshifter excuses herself to the bathroom. She sniffs some powder and then invites the man to leave with her, plotting to use him as her next body. Unbeknownst to her, someone is following them. They start making out and using the recreational substance at Rachel's place. The man gets aggressive and pins her on the couch, so the shapeshifter throws him off. Angered, she grabs a knife, but he fights back, causing her to lose the weapon. Instead, she hits him with a fridge door and a bottle, but he grabs the knife and attacks. The shapeshifter grabs the lamp and beats him with it. The bloodied man crawls out of the apartment, but the shapeshifter catches him and stabs him. Afterward, she changes clothes while a neighbor finds the man's body. The shapeshifter leaves the building just as the police arrive, but when she starts running, the officers get back in their car to chase after her. The shapeshifter hides out of their view and enters an open garage. After the police pass by, the shapeshifter sets up camp to stay the night. In the morning, she finds Max sleeping beside her. She moves to touch him, but spots her hand rotting already. Suddenly, Tommy arrives, and she comes out of hiding. Given that Rachel is a suspect and he's her boyfriend, she decides he's not a good form to change into and knocks him down. Tommy chases after her, so she hides inside the back of a truck until he leaves. Pain erupts on her side, leading her to believe that she's running out of time. She decides to tell Julia the truth, so she heads to her office building, where she sees Julia with Robert. They kiss and go on a date, so the jealous shapeshifter follows them. Pus starts seeping out of her rotting arm just as Julia and her date leave the restaurant. Soon, they part ways, and the shapeshifter decides to follow Robert. The man goes into his apartment, so she pretends to be a delivery person to make him open the door. The shapeshifter, now in Robert's form, calls Julia. He tells her that he likes her, so he invites her on another date, and Julia accepts. That evening, the shapeshifter visits Julia in her apartment and notices an overturned photo frame. Julia puts on some music, and the shapeshifter happily watches her. They enjoy some drinks and talk about their familiar connection with each other. The shapeshifter leans to kiss her, and they start making out. The moment is interrupted when Julia notices his bandaged torso. He explains that he just injured himself, but assures her that he's okay. They continue their intimacy in bed, and the shapeshifter relishes being with her that evening. When Julia wakes up, the shapeshifter is already cooking breakfast. They then spend the next day enjoying each other's company. But eventually, the shapeshifter goes home and deals with the real Robert's body. With the bar no longer an option, he takes the remains to the dam. Over the next few days, he spends more time with Julia like he always wanted. However, he knew it wasn't permanent. One day, Julia sees the news about the bodies from the farm. Rachel's body was also found, so she's no longer a suspect. The shapeshifter advises Julia not to watch it, but Julia stresses that she's met the victims at the bar before. He offers her comfort and promises to protect her. One evening, while he and Julia are preparing for a date, he notices the rot on his flesh. He hides in the bathroom and vomits, making Julia worry. He pulls himself together and asks Julia if she trusts him. Concerned, she sits on the couch, waiting for him to explain. The shapeshifter tells her that he was responsible for his mother's death when he was 12 years old. He contends that it was an accident, and it happened in 1954, confusing Julia. He continues that when he took his mother, he saw how she loved him. It was such pure love that he had never felt anywhere else until a few years ago. He tries to explain that he takes people to become someone else. If he doesn't, he'll die. When Julia asks what he takes, the shapeshifter explains that he takes everything that makes the person who they are, and all of their memories are still in his head. Still in disbelief, Julia decides to go home. He begs her to hear the rest of his story, but Julia asserts that she can't handle it. The shapeshifter then confesses that he's known and loved her longer than she knows. He then tells her that his real name is Drew, and he'd met her a dozen times before he was Robert. He adds that he first fell in love with her when he felt Richard's love for her. This angers Julia, but he continues that it was the second time he felt pure love. When he felt it, he wanted to make her happy, revealing that he was the Richard who set up the romantic night for her after their son passed away. When she asks where Richard is, Drew confesses that he's amongst the bodies on the farm. Mournful and confused, Julia starts to panic while Drew explains that he doesn't know what he really is, but he assures her that what he did was for his survival. Julia urges him to let her leave, but he continues cornering her. Suddenly, Julia pulls out a taser and threatens him with it. Still, he continues saying that he loves her. Julia then tases him and punches him to the ground. She then pins him down, but he grabs her arms, and the change begins. Julia screams as her body contorts and the rot takes her over. Drew, now in Julia's form, mourns for the only woman he loved. He then goes to the bar and thanks the bartender for taking care of Julia over the years. As he finishes his drink, Drew realizes that he's the only one who can stop what's happening to him. When he returns to Julia's apartment, he allows the rot to take over his body, accepting his death. In the morning, however, he becomes encapsulated inside a fleshy cocoon. He starts breaking out of the cocoon and emerges in his real, aged form. He's confused that he's not dead, still uncertain what he is. He goes to the city, still carrying all the memories and guilt. He decides that no matter how he justifies his existence and tries to do better, the guilt will live on. Drew goes to a park with Max and accepts that he'll never learn what he truly is.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.